In my previous life, we spent a lot of time thinking about hard targets. In the world of intelligence, you don't just protect an asset by hiding it behind a wall. Because walls can be climbed, and locks, they can be picked. True protection comes from making the asset functionally useless to anyone who doesn't have the key. If you steal the hardware but can't run the software, you haven't really gained an advantage. You've just acquired a heavy, expensive paperweight. Have fun lugging that thing around, right? Today, we're talking about intellectual sovereignty. So, in part one, we saw the aesthetic brand failing under pressure, and we talked about the professional taxidermy, right? The hollow shells of people wearing the quiet luxury outfit without the structural density to back it up. But for the originals, right? So, the people who actually have that vertical depth, the question is, how do you build a moat around your mind? How do you ensure that when someone tries to mirror your rhythm or scavenge from your frequency or borrow from your vocab, they don't just look like a copycat, but how do you make them look like a malfunction? So most people build brands on exportable assets. Catchy slogan, that's exportable. A specific color palette, also exportable. A 5-step framework for productivity, highly exportable. Now, if someone can take your thing, put their name on it, and still works, you don't have authority, you have a commodity. Sovereignty is built on non-exportable assets. Now, this is the difference between what you have and who you are. A non-exportable asset is your proprietary logic. It's the way you connect a geopolitical shift to a boredom dispute. It's the 3D model in your head that allows you to see the variables before they actually hit the fan. When an imitator steals your words, they're stealing the output, but they haven't stolen the engine. Now, think of it this way. They've stolen the map, but they've never been to the territory. So, when the territory changes, and it always does, their map becomes a liability. They will lead their clients directly to a dead end because they don't know how to actually redraw the lines in real time. Now, in high-end currency design, there's this thing called a watermark, right? It's invisible until you hold it up to the light. Your brand needs a watermark of nuance. A high-value signal is dense. It carries massive amounts of compressed data in every single pulse. Now, when you speak from a place of authority, every word is informed by years of failure, risk, and high-stakes tradecraft. So that brevity that you're so fond of, it's not a stylistic choice, but it's a functional necessity. You've stripped away the fluff because you've seen what happens when fluff meets reality in a locked room. Now, look at the imitator. They capture the carrier wave, right? The surface sound. They can use your emojis, they can mimic your quiet luxury pauses, right? But since they haven't lived the nuance, their signal is low res. It's like a photocopy of a photocopy. So by the third iteration, you just get a blurry piece of paper. The contrast is gone. Now, to the untrained eye, it looks the same, but to the people who actually run the room, they can see the pixels. They can hear the static too. And they know you're broadcasting on a frequency you haven't truly earned. Now, this is the part the scavengers might not like, the cost of entry. You can't rebrand your way into density. Density is a byproduct of friction. So every insight that I share in these videos has a price tag attached to it, right? It was paid for in rooms where I was the only person who knew the truth. It was paid for in decisions that had actual real-world consequences, not just engagement metrics. An imitator is a scavenger. They wait for the frontier thinker to do the work, to take the risk, to find that vocab. And then they strip the idea of its context, they wrap it in a cheaper aesthetic and sell it as a proprietary system. Now, here's the professional tragedy. You can't really fake the scars. When you borrow a voice you haven't earned, you create identity debt. So every time you hit post on a borrowed insight, you're telling your subconscious that the real you is not enough. And over time, the imitator loses the ability to even recognize an original thought of their own. The final layer of sovereignty is shifting from participation to curation. Participants follow trends, right? They join the conversation and they use the best practices that everyone else is using. They're part of the noise. Sovereigns, on the other hand, they curate the landscape. They don't ask, what is everyone talking about? And instead, they ask, what is everyone missing? They don't mirror the market, they actually provide the diagnostic for the market. Now, when you move to this level, you stop worrying about the copycats. In fact, you start to see them as a sign of a healthy ecosystem. They just prove that your signal is worth following. When you borrow vocab or voice that you haven't earned, you're not just misleading the audience, you're creating a resolution mismatch between your persona and your performance. You're essentially broadcasting a signal that your internal infrastructure can't actually support. And eventually, the room will ask for a level of depth you haven't built. And then, no amount of that curated vocab is actually going to save you. Sovereignty isn't something you perform, it's the baseline of your internal logic. It's the friction of every failure you've survived that turned into a non exportable asset. So, as you evaluate your own positioning today, ignore the aesthetic for a moment and look at the actual physics. And ask yourself, is this an insight I've actually authored, or am I just being a high quality echo? Because the people who actually run the room, they don't just hear the sound, they measure the density. I'll see you in part 3, where we discuss the final evolution, the sovereign advisor.